more than a bunker, it's an underground fortress. There are about 60 surface entrances to Derinkuyu.
Below our feet, there is the world's largest underground city, which made the history books rewritten.
Beneath an ordinary home in central Turkey, a man trying to understand why his chickens kept vanishing broke through a basement wall and stepped into a silence untouched for centuries. The narrow passage he entered was only the beginning, because the darkness ahead concealed an entire underground world, whose scale, purpose, and unexpected resilience would rewrite everything he thought he knew about the ground beneath him. The accidental discovery. When the resident of a modest home in Nevşehir province first noticed his chickens disappearing, he assumed they had slipped through a loose board or wandered into a neighbor's garden. Yet, the vanishing continued with no trace left behind. His attention eventually settled on a thin fracture in the basement wall, a feature he had previously ignored, but now regarded with a mix of irritation and curiosity, as he wondered whether a small predator had found its way inside. When he struck the wall to widen the crack, expecting to expose little more than compacted earth, the plaster collapsed into a hollow space that carried a cold current of air unlike anything typical of a household cavity. The opening revealed a descending tunnel carved with deliberate precision, indicating that this was no accidental void, but the entrance to something constructed with intention and skill. Compelled by a blend of caution and disbelief, he stepped inside and discovered chambers extending farther than the reach of his lantern light, each turn revealing new corridors that deepened the mystery of what existed below. As he continued forward, the unsettling realization emerged that his home stood atop a vast subterranean expanse, whose presence had remained hidden for generations. The world beneath the floorboards. The first chamber he entered felt strangely intact, as if its builders had stepped away only a short while earlier rather than centuries ago, and the air carried a cool steadiness that suggested a deliberate design rather than a natural cavern's irregular breath. As his lantern light traveled across the walls, he saw that every surface bore the marks of carving tools, forming smooth planes and rounded corners shaped with consistency that implied a planned architectural blueprint rather than improvised excavation. What initially resembled a single room soon opened into a sloping passage, and that passage branched into others, creating a network whose scale expanded faster than he could comprehend. When he paused to listen, the silence felt layered rather than empty, as though the depths absorbed sound into chambers beyond his reach. The air temperature remained almost unnervingly stable, and each step revealed structural patterns that hinted at a sophisticated understanding of airflow, circulation, and spatial order. He began noticing alcoves for storage, niches for lamps, and narrow vertical shafts whose purpose he could not yet decipher, but which broke the darkness with faint drafts from unseen levels. The deeper he moved, the more the city revealed its true nature, transforming from a curiosity into an engineered environment capable of supporting coordinated human activity. The idea that thousands of people might once have lived, worked, and taken refuge in these spaces began to take hold, challenging every assumption he had made about the empty land surrounding his home. This was not a forgotten cellar or abandoned hideout, but the entrance to an immense world constructed far beneath the soil. Engineering an invisible metropolis. As he advanced through the branching corridors, the intentional logic of the space became impossible to dismiss, because every chamber reflected a mastery of the region's volcanic tuff, a stone soft enough to carve yet strong enough to hold its shape for centuries once exposed to air. The builders had transformed this material into a network of interconnected rooms whose proportions balanced stability with efficient use of space, creating an underground metropolis hidden so completely that no indication of its presence appeared on the surface above. Ventilation shafts rose through multiple levels with remarkable alignment, allowing fresh air to circulate in ways that maintained a consistent temperature, and the subtle movement of the drafts confirmed that the system still functioned long after its creators had vanished. Water management displayed equal precision, since wells descended deep enough to reach the water table while incorporating safeguards that prevented contamination from above, demonstrating a strategic understanding of both survival and security. In upper chambers, he found evidence of livestock stables, whose placement likely allowed warm air from the animals to radiate downward, subtly heating adjacent living quarters and providing thermal comfort in an environment otherwise defined by stone and darkness. Even the city's defensive planning revealed sophisticated thinking because narrow passageways forced any hostile intruder to move in single file, leaving them vulnerable to residents who could withdraw into protected rooms and control access with monumental rolling stone doors carved to pivot smoothly despite their immense weight. Communication shafts between levels suggested coordinated habitation rather than scattered refuge, since they allowed occupants to relay information quickly without navigating the complex corridors during an emergency. Standing amid these features, he realized he was exploring a designed habitat whose inhabitants had engineered a functioning city beneath the earth with a vision that surpassed anything he had imagined. The seismic secret. The deeper he descended, the more the city's ingenuity expanded beyond simple engineering, because the lowest chambers revealed clues suggesting that Derinkuyi's builders understood the shifting instability of the Anatolian landscape and shaped their subterranean world to endure forces that routinely devastated settlements above ground. Researchers studying similar chambers in later excavations have noted that the tough layers at these depths naturally dampen horizontal seismic vibrations, creating an environment where tremors lose much of their destructive power, and the subtle scalloping along certain corridor ceilings indicates intentional shaping meant to redirect stress rather than resist it blindly. This discovery implies that the city was not merely a refuge from invading armies, but a deliberate sanctuary from earthquakes that have repeatedly reshaped Turkey's surface history. As he ran his fingers along the stone, the texture shifted from smooth planes to reinforced curves, whose patterns echoed structural principles that modern engineers associate with shock distribution, revealing an ancient architectural language built upon intimate familiarity with the ground's behavior. Unlike buildings on the surface that relied on height and rigidity, the underground design embraced depth as a stabilizing factor, allowing entire communities to survive events that would have toppled any structure exposed to open air. When he stepped into one of the broader chambers, he noticed how the floor felt unusually steady, as though anchored to a calmer layer of the earth. And this sensation introduced a new dimension to the city's purpose. Derinkuyu had not only sheltered its inhabitants from war, persecution, and scarcity, but had also offered them a protective silence during earthquakes, turning the subterranean world into an engineered haven where danger from above could not easily reach. Life in the underground province. As he continued through the widening maze of chambers, the space began revealing signs of a fully functioning society rather than a temporary hideout, because every level carried evidence of domestic rhythms shaped by the demands of long-term underground life. Storage rooms carved with meticulous symmetry held niches for grain, oils, and dried goods, indicating a food system designed to support thousands during extended periods of refuge. The stables on the upper levels suggested that livestock were not only a source of nourishment, but also contributors to the city's climate control, since their body heat warmed adjacent living sections in a subtle but essential exchange between humans and animals. Farther below, he found communal rooms arranged around wide halls that may have served as gathering spaces, instructional areas, or spiritual centers, which illustrated that life here extended beyond mere survival into education, ceremony, and collective memory. Narrow corridors branched toward shafts that plunged into deeper darkness, and as archaeologists later discovered, some of these long tunnels stretched miles across the region, linking Derinkuyu to the neighboring city of Kaymakli in a network resembling a subterranean province rather than isolated settlements. The psychological demands of such a world felt palpable in the muted acoustics of the chambers, where each footstep dissolved quickly into silence. And he imagined generations who lived through conflicts above without emerging for months. They relied on linseed oil lamps to soften the darkness, shared stories in rooms where light flickered against carved walls, and taught their children to navigate the layered city with familiarity equal to that of any surface street. Life underground was not an interruption, but a parallel existence, shaped by necessity, ingenuity, and resilience. A timeline of occupation and survival. As he moved upward again through the stacked chambers, the city's long chronology began to emerge in the architectural layers, because each era had carved its own intentions into the stone. Archaeologists later traced the earliest phases to the Phrygians of the 8th or 7th century before Common Era, whose initial excavations formed the foundational corridors that subsequent cultures would expand into a living monument of endurance. Centuries later, during periods of regional instability, new inhabitants deepened the tunnels and refined the infrastructure, adapting the original blueprint to shifting political landscapes and evolving threats. The city reached its greatest extent between the 7th and 11th centuries Common Era, when early Christian communities reshaped many levels into sanctuaries that protected them from the turbulence of the Arab-Byzantine conflicts. They added churches, religious schools, and communal chambers that reflected both spiritual devotion and the practical need for safe seclusion during prolonged sieges. Even after hostilities faded, the underground refuge remained vital to local Greek populations, who relied on it for security well into the modern era. Its final closure came in 1923, when the population exchange between Greece and Turkey emptied entire villages and severed centuries of continuity. When residents sealed the entrances and departed, they left behind a multi-layered archive of human adaptation, waiting silently beneath the earth for modern discovery. What Derinkuyu means today. Modern researchers view Derinkuyu as a rare intersection of engineering intuition and environmental awareness, because its design demonstrates how ancient builders shaped entire habitats around stability, airflow, and long-term survival rather than short-term refuge. Although only a portion of the city has been fully mapped, each new survey reveals additional shafts and chambers that hint at a broader landscape still hidden beneath the region. These discoveries encourage archaeologists, geologists, and architects to reconsider how past societies adapted to uncertainty, turning the underground world into a living archive of strategies we are only beginning to understand. Derinkuyu shows how far people will go to protect what matters, carving safety into the earth when danger ruled the surface. If you want more stories that reshape how you see history, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this journey with someone who loves hidden worlds as much as you do.